Was it Caesar's invading armies, zealous Christian bishops, or a conquering caliph who truly set the Library of Alexandria ablaze, turning the heartbeat of ancient learning into smoke and memory? Tonight, tuck yourself beneath the covers as we slip through the marble corridors of vanished Alexandria, tracing the ghostly footprints of philosophers and secrets lost forever, unraveling stories of genius, ambition, and catastrophe, all whispered in the gentle darkness. Let the hush of the past wrap around you, soothing yet tinged with the intrigue of unsolved mysteries, as we chase the truth of what the greatest library the world has ever known really kept, and what wonders vanished with its flames. Imagine yourself, now, adrift on the shimmering edge of Egypt, where morning sunlight pools golden along whitewashed stone, and markets hum quietly beneath the rising day. In this great city of Alexandria, a crossroads of the world, a young woman of unusual privilege comes of age. Her name is Hypatia, daughter of Theon, mathematician and philosopher. Hypatia is shaped by her father's devotion to learning. Within rooms thick with the scent of oils and fresh papyrus, she is taught the language of the stars, the architecture of numbers, the delicate logic of words. The library's very presence pulses through her veins. Her days, an endless rhythm of study, debate, scrolls unrolled beneath ember-lit lamps, in a world stratified by custom and expectation. Hypatia's childhood is gently, persistently radical. She is seen not as a daughter to be tucked quietly into domestic life, but as a mind to be cultivated. The rhythm of her life echoes with slow, careful learning, the movements of celestial orbs, the measured beat of numbers, the yearning of understanding, a universe both infinite and intimate. Even then, her legend begins to unfurl. Neighbors whisper gently, with notes of awe and caution. A young woman who can outwit the finest scholars from Athens or Rome, who walks without fear beneath the shadowed porticos of the Mausian. Her presence calm, yet unsettling. Presence composed, luminous, and quietly determined. That will chart a course through the tumult of Alexandria's last age of greatness. For those who meet her gaze, the library's promise flickers in her eyes. The promise that all minds, when nourished and allowed to wander, can reshape the world. And in these quiet, sun-dappled years of learning, as scrolls whisper of lost cities and mysteries yet unsolved, no one suspects just how much the shape of wisdom and of history will soon hinge upon a single, quiet voice. As Alexandria's sunlight drifts toward midday, picture the rhythm of the agora, the broad, bustling square where scholars mingle with merchants, and orators raise thoughtful questions alongside the cacophony of hawkers. In this daily ballet, Hypatia becomes a rare and luminous presence, her form draped in the plain white robe that marks her as a philosopher, not a seeker of show or spectacle. She is tall, with features notable not for their ornament, but for the direct, tranquil composure that radiates from within. Her voice is sure, her words measured, flowing in conversation like water channeled through ancient irrigation. For many, the sight of a woman presiding over public discourse is foreign. Yet Hypatia is met, most often, not with scorn, but with the silent architecture of respect. The rhythm of her teaching, equal parts logic, rhetoric, and gentle correction, constructs a rare sanctuary for inquiry. Students, too, are drawn from distant lands, Greeks craving new geometries, Egyptians seeking celestial lore, wealthy Romans testing their wits. They gather around Hypatia under the colonnades, their faces dappled with sun and wonder, unrolling scrolls and mapping questions that stretch beyond empirical comfort. She encourages them not to accept but to question, to examine the roots of every proof, to wander boldly through abstraction at these gatherings. You might catch a drift of philosophical debate, rising softly over the hum of city life. Hypatia, always calm, guides the discussion from the surface of mathematical theorems to the hazy edge where reason grapples with the unknown. She prefers clarity, not argument. Her hands often draw figures in dust or hover above star maps. The language of cosmos swirling gently at her fingertips. It is said that she moved through this world unobtrusively, but with an energy that seemed to animate the very air around her. Her intellect both a beacon and, to some, a quiet but growing challenge. Under the hot Egyptian sun, ideas are seeds, scattered by the wind of Hypatia's voice, and beneath the surface, in the patterns of shadow and light, city politics, religious fervor and simmering unease gather, watching, always, as philosophy tries to hold. Imagine dusk descending upon Alexandria. The brightness softens, shadows pooling between the columns and beneath the palm leaves. As the city exhales, the peaceful hush of Hypatia's classroom gives way to the more uncertain undertones of Alexandria's changing spirit. Once, this was a city built on tolerance and inquiry. Greeks, Egyptians, Jews, and Romans shared crowded streets, their prayers and debates rising together in a kind of layered harmony. But with the empire's fortunes shifting and the old gods displaced, new pressures creep steadily through the city's veins. The rhythm of daily commerce becomes frenetic. Whispers swirl through baths and winehouses, and lines are drawn, often invisible, but always felt. Religious conflict simmers beneath the surface. Christianity is rising, no longer a movement hunted on the margins, but a growing force, assertive and organized. Temples falter, curious glances become frowns, and Alexandria's fragile peace stirs uneasily, like reeds trembling in an autumn wind. For Hypatia, the world grows subtly less welcoming. She remains devoted to the traditions of Greek learning, seeking truth through mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy rather than dogma. Her identity as a woman of reason in a city now drawn to faith and certainty stands silently against the shifting tide. Yet, she is not withdrawn. She serves as an advisor to Orestes, the Roman prefect, a voice of moderation and logic in a landscape hardening into factions. Some admire her calm. Others find in her presence a quiet but dangerous reminder of the old ways. These days, the language of shadows grows, political debates shaded with religious questions, friendships splintered on the axis of belief. There are moments when Hypatia's gentle composure conceals an underlying tension, felt keenly but spoken of only in soft tones. The tension between inquiry and authority, between learning and power, between the world as it was and the world that is coming. It is within this evening hush, as Alexandria listens to the distant waves and the low drone of street lamps being lit, that Hypatia's life stands delicately poised, an emblem of wisdom, still bright, but surrounded now by gathering clouds. Let us drift deeper into Alexandria's intricate latticework, the social tapestries and intellectual circles converging at the center of Hypatia's world. Imagine marble floors gleaming in lamplight, voices echoing in porticoed halls, the movement of sandal straps and the gentle creak of reed pens. Here strategy is exchanged as carefully as knowledge, and the boundaries between personal loyalty and public power blur gently at the edges. Hypatia's influence is subtle yet profound. Students are fiercely devoted, not merely to her teachings, but to the values she embodies: patience, clarity, an unwavering search for what is real. Among them are future statesmen, mathematicians, and even priests, men who will carry her ideas far beyond the city's walls. In her home, a space scented with wood smoke and the remembrance of ink, philosophy waxes and wanes alongside ordinary moments. The sharing of bread, quiet conversations, laughter echoing dimly, always in the background. Yet Hypatia is also trusted by power. The Roman prefect Orestes often consults her on matters both practical and philosophical, their exchanges marked by mutual respect and a measured gravity. To Orestes, she is a steady companion in a city rumbling with opposing factions. For others, especially among the old elites, she is a beacon, proof that the rhythm of Alexandria's past brilliance can endure, if only for a moment longer. This very beacon, though, casts shadows. Bishop Cyril, a rising star among Christian leaders, views Hypatia's influence uneasily. He sees in her a wellspring of the old ways, and, perhaps, a rival. Gossip glides through the streets. Is her counsel an impediment to the new order? Does she sway Orestes against the church? The whispers grow, subtle fears wrapped in the language of rumor, feeding on both ignorance and genuine reverence. Still, Hypatia continues, as always. She hosts debates that challenge the limits of knowledge, writes letters filled with gentle encouragement and pointed inquiry, reminds her listeners, again and again, that loyalty to truth is the only virtue that truly endures. Her home remains open, a haven amid uncertainty, its tranquility both fragile and radiant. Yet, in the hush between conversations, the city's divisions gather more tightly around her, the boundaries of safety narrowing imperceptibly, even as the lamps burn bright. Let us settle into the slow, anxious unveiling of events. As Alexandria's divisions sharpen, the city's former harmonies slipping further into memory with each passing day. You might imagine walking that city's streets in the gathering dusk, where sharp glances and hurried steps betray the nervous rhythm beneath. The city's outward calm, the air is thick with opposing currents. Christian ascetics preach in the squares, their lambent faith drawing crowds that spill over into one's secular debate. Orestes, the Roman governor, now finds his authority undercut, scrutinized, as Cyril, bishop and architect of the city's new spiritual order, gathers influence. Public spaces, long places of inquiry and gentle disputation, bristle instead with uncertainty and growing unrest. Amid all this, Hypatia's position at the crossroads of learning and governance becomes precarious. Letter writers and travelers from distant lands seek her counsel. Her opinions ripple outward, carried on the tongues of her students. But power now is less enamored with the questions of philosophers and more inclined toward answers claimed with absolute certainty. Even so, Hypatia walks her chosen path with dignity. She refuses to cloak herself in any particular side of the brewing conflict, instead meeting both church and state with the same open gaze. Yet, neutrality proves difficult. She is seen, by some, as an impediment to the city's new spiritual identity, a symbol of the pagan traditions that the rising Christian leaders wish to sweep away. Her presence, once treasured as a bridge between communities, now draws suspicion. Her meetings with Orestes spark rumor. Her lectures, which once welcomed all who sought knowledge, are whispered about as subversive gatherings. The tenuous peace that once let scholars mingle with bishops and merchants begins to erode throughout the turmoil. Hypatia endures, steadfast, composed, still guiding, comforting, inspiring. Her resolve radiates calm while the city around her tilts into the unknown, the familiar rhythm of Alexandria replaced by something quickened, unsettled, and fraught. It is a constant struggle, a quiet act of resistance, to believe that wisdom might still prevail, even as discord closes in, ever more tightly. The lines between past and emerging present blur, and the legend that grows around her begins its slow, inevitable darkening. As the calendar turns and spring approaches, there descends a peculiar hush, an unspoken acknowledgement that the delicate balance within Alexandria cannot hold much longer. Picture city streets glazed with morning haze, courtyards where the scent of cypress and incense blends with a new, almost foreboding expectancy. The rhythm of daily life is mottled by rumors, as small incidents ignite larger anxieties, and every act is shaded with political and spiritual implication. Orestes, still prefect, is locked in open conflict with Bishop Cyril and his increasingly assertive followers. The city that was once a mosaic of many peoples now cleaves along sharp, unforgiving lines. In this charged environment, suggestion becomes accusation, and suspicion feeds upon itself, often whispered just beyond Hypatia's hearing, yet always present. For Hypatia, these waning days are spent as she has always spent them, teaching, reasoning, seeking solace in the logic of geometry, the vast calm predictability of the stars. Students continue to seek her doorstep. Friends plead for caution. Even those who oppose her recognize the stillness she brings, a wisdom that does not blink before uncertainty, a voice gentle yet immune to the strident calls of zealotry. Still, her routines grow shadowed. Trusted companions, once frequent visitors, are seen less often. Warnings begin to gather like clouds around her, some explicit, some merely woven into the silence between kind words. She persists, believing. Perhaps that reason and careful dialogue might yet soothe the city's unrest. Her example serving as a quiet bulwark against fanaticism and fear. But the forces arrayed against her are no longer interested in discourse. They have taken shape in street corner whispers, public processions, and anonymous pamphlets. One can almost hear, now, the distant echo of trouble, footsteps quickening. On mosaic walkways, the tension in the air thick as Alexandria's storied fog. What began as an intellectual dispute, and then as a contest for civic authority, leans now toward tragedy, the kind that writes itself, slowly and implacably, into the memory of a city. And within her rooms, simple, neat, lined with scrolls and the soft evidence of an examined life, Hypatia moves quietly, her mind resting, as ever, on the pursuit of knowledge. Even as the world outside prepares to collapse around her, in the heavy air of an Alexandrian morning, sunlight spills across rough-cut flagstones, and the city, for a brief instant, seems suspended between hope and foreboding. You can almost feel the slow, purposeful rhythm of Hypatia as she leaves. Her home, the philosopher's robe she favors, flowing quietly behind her, pale against the city's swirl of color and clamor. Today, however, the mood is different. Unrest has spread from rumor to reality. The night's gossip lingers like dust, uneasily settling amid the waking sounds of Alexandria. Vendors setting up wares, clattering carts, soft call to prayer from unseen courtyards. Eyes follow her as she passes, some admiring, some filled with fear or envy, all sensing a moment of gravity. Hypatia's reputation, long her shield and her calling, offers little protection now. Her calm presence, once a source of reassurance, is seen by her adversaries as a final vestige of resistance against a new order they mean to impose. In the city's tangled alleys and sun-drenched plazas, the boundaries between personal and political, between scholarly devotion and public action, have dissolved. She walks not toward a lecture hall, but along a route heavy with memory, past colonnades that once echoed with debate, beneath windows where generations of students awaited her insights. The city's familiar pulse now feels precarious, as though Alexandria itself is tense, each hesitant step echoing beyond stone and dust. The gathering crowd approaches as quietly as a wave washes over smooth sand. Followers of Cyril, driven by a mix of faith, fervor, and a sense that history itself demands a sacrifice. They do not see a scholar or a philosopher, a woman patiently striving for the light of reason. Instead, they see a relic of the old world, one last symbol to erase, one more barrier between their vision and their future. As Hypatia is surrounded, the ordinary sounds of the city seem to dim. Silence falls, thick and wide as the shadow beneath a column, and in this moment, poised between worlds, the fate of Hypatia and the Alexandria she represents is sealed not only by the hands of her attackers, but by the slow, relentless tide of change sweeping inexorably through the city. When the dust settles, the city of Alexandria seems to hold its breath. The streets return to a careful, subdued rhythm, a silence threaded through with absences. It is in these empty spaces that Hypatia's death is most keenly felt. The familiar echo of her footsteps through the agora is gone. The gentle murmur of her voice vanished from public debate, her sanctuary of learning shadowed by grief and uncertainty. Word travels quietly among her students and fellow philosophers. Some retreat into the sanctity of small, private gatherings, clutching notes and letters. Physical reminders of her logic and kindness, handled gently, the ink beginning already to fade. In the recesses of homes filled with scrolls and memories, you might hear the comfort of remembrance spoken softly, stories traded about Hypatia's lessons, her compassion, her discipline, her love for inquiry. Her influence, woven into the hearts of those she taught, persists even as her living presence is erased. Yet, beyond the sorrow of her followers, her absence is deeply symbolic, a turning point not just for individuals, but for the city's soul. The message is unmistakable. Alexandria's legendary culture of open debate, its cosmopolitan embrace of different voices, has suffered a blow from which it may not recover. Fewer and fewer dare to challenge the certainties of power, and a sense of fragility now hovers over the once thriving intellectual life of the city. For those watching from afar, perhaps in Athens or distant Rome, news of Hypatia's fate carries both shock and resignation, as though acknowledging the slow closing of a chapter that once promised so much. Letters written in her memory reflect both sorrow for her loss and anxiety for what the broader implications might hold, not just for philosophy, but for the very nature of what society values and preserves. And so, as night steals across Alexandria, the gentle glow of oil lamps flickers against the encroaching dark. In this quieter city, ideas survive on the whispered shores of memory. And the question remains, what happens to wisdom when it is left unguarded, vulnerable to the tides of fear and zealotry? In the weeks and months that follow Hypatia's death, Alexandria changes in subtle but profound ways. The libraries and lecture halls, once bustling with curious minds from every corner of the known world, grow quieter, their lively debates now subdued. Some scholars slip away discreetly, seeking safer cities, while others remain, but lower their voices. Pamphlets and letters written in coded praise of Hypatia begin to circulate. But fear guides many more hands away from the page altogether. Yet her absence becomes a kind of presence, more resonant because it is unmet and unspoken. Students find themselves repeating her lessons as mantras under their breath, seeking comfort and clarity in the axioms of geometry and the celestial rhythms she so patiently explained. Even among those who once doubted or opposed her, a reflective silence lingers. It is difficult to ignore the space she once filled in the city's shared imagination. The work she accomplished, her mathematical commentaries, astronomical treatises, carefully crafted devices, remains in fragments, cited by others, but often deprived of her name. The rhythm of her teachings continues, flowing under the surface like a quiet current, contributing to future discoveries even as the city tries to forget the cost. What is lost is not only her voice, but the encouragement she offered to others, especially women and outsiders, to wonder, to question, to participate in the long, slow quest for understanding. The city's spiritual leaders, meanwhile, doubled down on unity and control, wary of any dissent that might suggest the city's old pluralism could survive the new order. Yet the story of Hypatia, quietly traded in shadows and drifting on parchment, refuses to fade entirely. It whispers of a time when knowledge was treasured, and the courage to seek the truth, however quietly, could forge a legacy to outlast not only one life, but an age. As the sea wind sweeps the coastline and nights grow longer, Alexandria slips further from the memory of what she once was. But deep in the silence, the outline of Hypatia's influence remains. An unanswered question, a lullaby of reason, a soft but persistent hope that wisdom, once awakened, is never truly extinguished. Time does not erase Hypatia's story, it refracts it, sending her memory shimmering through the centuries. Her legend both more enigmatic and more enduring because of the silence that followed her loss. As Alexandria itself contracts and transforms, the world beyond its harbors continues to whisper her name, though often cloaked in the uncertainties of incomplete records and myth-laced retellings. For some, Hypatia becomes a martyr for knowledge, a luminous figure whose life symbolizes the vulnerability of wisdom in the face of power and dogma. Poets and chroniclers, centuries removed, evoke her as the last scholar of the ancient world, her death marking not just a personal tragedy, but the closing of an era where curiosity could truly thrive. Others reconstruct her life through the shards that remain, the quotations embedded in later treatises, testimonies of awe from former students, the rare surviving praise from early Christian writers who admit, however reluctantly, to her genius. Alexandria, meanwhile, now looks out over quieter waters. The city's celebrated library, a symbol of all that once was possible, is increasingly remembered not for its scrolls, but for the dreams it could not keep safe. Each new generation wonders what might have been preserved, what discoveries might have emerged had Hypatia and those like her been sheltered instead of silenced. Her echo reverberates subtly in scientific texts that reach into the Islamic Golden Age, in medieval arguments about faith and logic, and in the slow reawakening of mathematics and astronomy much later, when scholars bravely recover fragments of her world from the long night of forgetting. Her legend becomes not an accusation, but a gentle admonition, a reminder that enlightenment is never given freely, but must be tended with vigilance, courage, and care. And so, as you nestle further into the stillness of night, the gentle cadence of Hypatia's life and loss lulls you, her story a soft, unbroken thread woven through time, carrying both caution and consolation. The unquiet echoes of her wisdom murmur that even if knowledge slips from our grasp, the yearning for it, the longing to seek, to know, to dream, endures, quietly resilient, waiting always for the next mind to wake and listen. Let us step softly now into the marble silence of the vanished library. Through the grand colonnades, columns rising pale and cool in the morning air. Imagine an expansive space where oil lamps flicker along row upon row of scrolls, the air thick with the dry, papery scent of knowledge accumulated across centuries. At its height, the Library of Alexandria held not only books, but the weight of the world's curiosity. A staggering number of scrolls gathered in pursuit of all that could be known, but what did those shelves truly contain? With the embers of history now long cold, the answer is both simple and impossibly vast. We will never fully know. Once, texts gathered from east and west brushed shoulders here, brought by ship captains, diplomats, and conquerors, the works of mathematicians and poets, natural philosophers and astronomers, all under one roof. A kind of wonder cabinet, curated by generations who believed that all wisdom, human and divine, belonged together. Imagine now the echo left in this emptiness. Titles we've never heard, discoveries uncredited, stories erased before they could seep into the marrow of civilization. Some of those lost, volumes on geometry, treatises on medicine, plays and histories, are known only by reference in other works. A footnote here, a tantalizing line there. Others hover only in rumor. Keys to automata and inventions, arcane texts on alchemy and the stars, magical formulae, secret rites. The void in those empty shelves is not merely the absence of parchment and ink, but the silencing of countless voices, generations of thinkers whose findings might have redirected the river of knowledge, if only their words had survived the flames. It is the echo of what could have been, dreams of a world more connected, more enlightened, forever shimmering just out of reach. As midnight draws in, we linger among those shadows, where absence itself becomes the greatest mystery, and the hunger for lost wisdom is as haunting as any ghost within the stone. Drift with me now along the gentle current of Alexandria's scientific legacy, a current made choppy by gaps, its banks shaped by hands and minds that have faded to legend. In the heart of the library's vanished halls, experiments were not rare spectacles, but rituals of daily pursuit. Here, the world was dissected, measured, observed with the hope that nature's rules might be tamed by reason. Consider the mathematicians, whose formulas traced invisible patterns in the cosmos. Some, like Euclid, left fragments that remain. With us, the geometry of space marked indelibly by his inquiries. But many more texts are lost, proofs and theorems that may have advanced understanding of number and form beyond what we could ever reconstruct. What higher planes of mathematics, what elegant solutions to ancient puzzles once unfolded beneath those vaulted ceilings. The early astronomers studied the shifting sky, their calculations recording cycles and eclipses with astonishing precision. Eratosthenes, a librarian himself, measured the circumference of the earth with a shadow, while Hipparchus mapped the stars and speculated on their distances. Yet the full scope of their work, the details of their methods and discoveries are all dimly lit, surviving only as reflections in later writings. Did the shelves of Alexandria hold blueprints for understanding planetary motion centuries before such models would resurface in distant lands? Medicine, too, flourished in this city. the anatomical texts and herbal catalogues, case histories, and surgical procedures. Some would echo down to Galen in Rome and Ibn Sina in Persia. But how many more promising secrets of healing? How many proto-scientific observations of health and disease were lost when the flames or rot or simple time claimed the scrolls? Was there, perhaps, a forgotten cure or a theory which, if carried forward, might have spared generations agony? And so, we float in a gentle paradox. The legacy of the library is both what it gave and what it quietly withheld. The rhythm of discovery, interrupted, leaves us with as many tantalizing mythobins as certainties, an ancient world on the brink of something greater. Its wisdom lingering like a dream upon waking, always just beyond the reach of remembering. Imagine, for a moment, the library not just as a home to reason and science, but as a sanctuary for texts steeped in wonder, the kind of wonder that hovers on the threshold between reality and legend. In Alexandria, alongside scrolls of logic and medicine, there were also volumes that explored the intangible, rituals, dreams, cosmic harmonies, and the secret languages of gods and stars. Here, magicians, alchemists, and mystics sought knowledge as fervently as mathematicians. The lines between science and myth were not so firmly drawn as they are today. Some texts described symphonies of planetary influence, a music of the spheres, turning fate and fortune with celestial rhythms. Others explored the lore of Egypt's ancient priests, the wisdom of healing crystals, the formulas for protective amulets, the chance to summon or banish unseen powers. These were woven together in the minds of Alexandria's scholars into a holistic tapestry, one that sought not just to measure the world, but to understand its soul. Many scrolls at the library were said to contain arcane recipes, elixirs of immortality, powders that warded off disease, concoctions whispered to grant visions of distant lands or future days. Some of these traditions may have been pure invention. Others, seed ideas that, with careful cultivation, would later grow into chemistry, pharmacology, and the search for psychological meaning. Every so often, a learned traveler would copy out an especially precious spell or ritual guide, its lines inscribed with the restrained grace of hope and caution. What might those words have been? Perhaps methods for constructing automatons, a mechanical bird, a speaking statue, a self-filling lamp. Alexandria's engineers, blending technical skill with mythic inspiration, blurred the line between miracle and mechanism. We know of these lost writings because their shadows appear elsewhere, in the margins and memories of those who moved on to new cities and new ages. The Hermetic texts, fragments of mystical philosophy pondering the relation of mind and cosmos, survive only in splinters. Tales of ancient inventions and great magicians drift through later Arabic, Jewish, and Christian lore, traced always, however dimly, back to their brilliant, vanished home. As the night deepens, we are left to wander among these possibilities, a garden of knowledge both rational and miraculous, tended by minds open to the full mystery of existence. In that hush, the distinction between science and magic is softened, and the promise of Alexandria becomes a lullaby. Now, let your mind meander through the workshop corners of the library, where the scent changes, sharper, touched with metal, oil, and the faint tank of heated stone. Alexandria's Mausian was not merely a haven for readers, but also for tinkerers and experimenters, engineers who delighted in blending the poetry of mathematics with the practical magic of invention. Here, ancient texts described astonishing devices, Some sources speak of Heron or Hero of Alexandria, whose ingenious machines melded steam, pressure, and balance into something near miraculous. He wrote treatises on automata, mechanical servants or animals animated by gears and water, used in temples and at banquets to inspire delight or awe. His Iolopile, a primitive steam engine, may have spun quietly in a marble alcove, centuries before the world would know mechanical industry. But for every Heron whose notes and diagrams survive in part, there may have been scores of other inventors, their creations unrecorded except as rumor. Imagine treatises on optics, lenses and mirrors crafted to focus light, theories on refraction lost long before the Renaissance would rediscover them, or anatomical models constructed to study the body in 3 dimensions, perhaps even clockwork representations of the cosmos itself, or water-driven gadgets that measured time or distance with elegant precision. Ancient sources tantalize us with hints, the possibility of early orreries, mechanical globes showing the movements of heavenly bodies, cryptic references to wondrous constructions that drew crowds, their workings lost to secrecy or to the irretrievable passing of their creators. The architecture of the library itself, its labyrinth of rooms and secret gardens, may have harbored hidden fountains, clever locks, and winding corridors designed not just for beauty, but to evoke the mysteries of knowledge revealed only to the patient and persistent. With the library's fall, so many of these devices disappeared. Only pale descriptions survive, if at all, their blueprints perhaps scattered with the ashes of scrolls, or simply folded into the darkness of forgotten corners. Even where the legends seemed fanciful, they point to a reality. Alexandria was a place where the mind's curiosity reached into the tactile, the mechanical, and the marvelous. As you drift deeper into serenity, the gentle clatter of invisible gears and the imagined whoosh of ancient steam come to lull you ever further, murmuring, "What else might we have made, had the secret workshops of Alexandria survived one more night?" In Alexandria's quiet halls, the pursuit of health and healing held pride of place. Imagine the low hum of discussion among healers and scholars, the clean scent of pressed herbs mingling with beeswax from burning lamps, an atmosphere both studious and intensely practical. Here the boundaries between physician, natural philosopher, and alchemist blurred, their efforts unified by a common goal, to understand the body and soothe its suffering. Medical texts, some celebrated and many now lost, comprised meticulous catalogues of plants, minerals, animal products, and their combinations. These treatises detailed remedies for fever and wounds, methods to prepare anesthetics, lists of surgical tools, each described in careful prose, shaped by generations of hands-on experimentation. Papyri from Egypt and Greece reference the vast accumulation of knowledge once housed in Alexandria, the properties of willow bark, the curative powers of honey and vinegar, the early use of molds for infection, all echoing through the ages. Here, surgeons traced the intricate paths of veins and nerves, observed the beating of the heart, debated the nature of life's spark. Some preserved partial knowledge. Galen, for instance, would later codify much of what flowed through these halls, and his ideas would ripple through worlds far distant. But behind his writings, 1,000 minor voices have been stilled. Midwives, herbalists, careful observers, whose modest corrections or local insights might have revolutionized what later became medical science. Lost to time were also the more speculative texts, accounts of dreams interpreted as symptoms, astrological guides for choosing the right moment to treat a patient, and notes on mind-body connections that we can only hint at today. Perhaps among those vanished scrolls were drafts proposing germ theory or early studies of epidemic patterns, or frameworks for understanding the interplay of emotion and health. And so, in the shadow of absence, we can only piece together this mosaic of ancient healing, the earnest experimentation, the hopeful chronicling of remedies, the careful watching and wondering that are the marks of those who truly seek to ease the suffering of their neighbors. The rhythm of their lives, constant and humble, reminds us, even in the face of loss, the human impulse to heal is unyielding. Feel, now, in the soft hush that follows, the gentle reassurance that these lost voices are never wholly gone. Their questions linger, quiet as breath, whispering hope for the next generation to rediscover what was once found and lost by starlight in Alexandria. Within the cool, shaded porticos of Alexandria's library, wisdom meant more than facts and formulas. It was a living dialogue, a chorus of ideas from every shore of the ancient world. Imagine shelves filled not only with technical treatises, but with philosophies bold and searching, voices that shaped the mind's approach to the mystery of existence itself. Some of these have come down to us, the echoes of Plato and Aristotle, questions about the nature of virtue, the workings of logic, the meaning of happiness. Yet the library was also a melting pot, where lesser-known schools flourished. Neoplatonists, skeptics, Stoics, Epicureans, all debating, adapting, responding to the challenges of their day. Their works, in hundreds of volumes, examined the soul's place in the cosmos, the cultivation of serenity, the anatomy of reason and emotion, housed in the same stacks as astronomical tables and medical handbooks. These scrolls carried insights into ethics and governance, meditations on suffering, and reflections on friendship and love. They tackled problems still familiar today. How do we live in harmony with nature, with each other, and with our own restless minds? Unrecorded doctrines and arguments flicker at the edges, a slip of papyrus, a passing quotation in a later text, glimpses of dialogues now lost. In the shifting sands of those shelves may have been treatises, attempting to reconcile Eastern and Western thought, or playful letters blending myth with logic, or even blueprints for societies built on justice and reason. With the library's dispersal, much was scattered, and the gentle interplay of voices, the slow, collective striving for wisdom, fractured. Some texts survived only as summaries, others only as accusations by their critics. The rhythm of scholarly life was more than a striving for certainty. It was a constant struggle between dogma and doubt, faith and reason, order and improvisation. The library's loss was not an end, but rather a scattering, the dialogue continuing for centuries in quieter tones, further afield. And so, as you feel the pull of sleep drawing near, imagine those soft yet insistent debates continuing under the hush of midnight. Their logic twining through your thoughts, a comfort, a challenge, and a reminder that philosophy's deepest work is never finished, even when its books have gone silent. Among the most poignant absences in the Library of Alexandria were the careful chronicles of the past, and the forward-looking treatises attempting to anticipate what was to come. Imagine, for a moment, a row of shelves housing the wisdom of lands far beyond Egypt's borders, histories from Persia, India, Mesopotamia, even Carthage and distant Gaul, each scroll a slow distillation of experience, culture, and the persistent attempt to make sense of humanity's tangled journey. Alexandria prized not only Greek triumphs but also the records and epics of other civilizations. Some of these were methodical, year-by-year annals describing kingdoms, battles, trade routes, floods, and droughts. Others were more poetic, legends of migration, tales of kings and wise women, songs sung on lonely roads and crowded courts alike. When the flames or time claimed these riches, the continuity of memory, one of the library's greatest gifts, fractured. Entire peoples vanished more quickly and completely than any city, for without their stories, they slipped into shadow. Equally valuable and equally lost were the speculative visions, texts in which scholars tried to project future discoveries, discussions of new forms of governance, explorations of utopias or dystopias, perhaps even early notes on the concept of progress itself. Some historians theorize that, in those lost works, might have lain nascent philosophies of social justice, inklings of technological futures, or warnings about the cycles of societal rise and collapse. We catch glimpses in the writings of those who came later. Arab and Persian historians and philosophers, sometimes working off fragments rescued from the library's ruins, comment on the grandeur and diversity of lost Alexandrian histories. What we have inherited is partial, shaped as much by accident as by intent. A patchwork of quotations, paraphrases, and analogies that endure only because they were stitched into newer texts. The heartbeat of ancient history, originally so wide and inclusive, thinned to faint, solitary pulses dot in the mute rows where these histories once rested. Imagine futures that never quite arrived and pasts we cannot fully remember. The rhythm of civilization itself was altered, set adrift between what was preserved and what was allowed to fade. Alexandria's tragedy was not only the destruction of books, but the silencing of memory and imagination, a legacy whose effects still ripple outward to this night. Let that gentle ache serve as a lullaby. We are shaped by the stories we forget, as much as by the tales we tell, and somewhere in the hush of lost voices sleeps the potential of all our tomorrows. Not every secret of Alexandria's library vanished in fire or neglect. Some scrolls traveled quietly, carried by scholars fleeing uncertain futures, packed tightly among other personal treasures, or transcribed in distant cities where echoes of the ancient world still lingered. These survivors, scattered and often disguised, became invisible roots for centuries of subsequent learning. Picture a Greek philosopher departing with a precious copy of an Aristotelian treatise, sharing it with students in Athens long after Alexandria's glory had waned. Imagine early Christian writers translating and commenting on ancient natural philosophy as it suited their worldview, preserving fragments even as they critiqued their pagan sources. The rhythms of Hebrew, Syriac, and later Arabic scholarship pulsed with Alexandrian currents, as translators in Baghdad's House of Wisdom collected what they could find: mathematics, medicine, star charts, and philosophical dialogues. Much of it traced in parenthetical references back to Egypt's storied city. Some texts survived only in translation, altered by the language and tastes of their new custodians. Others survived solely by reputation, described in tantalizing catalogues. Their actual contents lost, but their titles, a reminder of promise unfulfilled. There are treatises mentioned by later writers that have never been found, spells referenced but never fully transcribed, astronomical tables rumored but absent from even the most painstaking inventories. Paradoxically, these survivors, fragmentary, translated, adapted, ensured that the spirit of Alexandria whispered on the Renaissance mathematicians and scientists, from Leonardo to Copernicus, dug deep in Latin and Arabic sources for clues, reconstructing and reviving ideas whose origin always pointed to the library's vanished shelves. In this way, the mystery of what was lost is softened by the humble persistence of what secretly endured. Amid the ruins, then, consider the strength of these quiet survivals, the enduring rhythm of minds refusing to let wisdom die. A copied theorem, a half-remembered remedy, a myth reimagined in a far-off land. Each one is a lullaby of resilience, carrying comfort through the long night of loss. So, as you let these gentle echoes drift toward you, feel the solace of continuity, the assurance that even in the wake of disaster, knowledge, like a resilient reed, bends but does not wholly break. Now, drift further into contemplation, past what is known, into the shimmering territory of speculation. What might our world have looked like if Alexandria's library had endured? Its scrolls preserved carefully through the centuries, its scholars continuing their ancient rhythm of inquiry. There is a gentle ache in wondering what might have been. Imagine, if you will, a renaissance not delayed by 1,000 years but blossoming at the edge of late antiquity. The mathematics of Archimedes, known to us only in fragments, might have seeded early breakthroughs in engineering. The emerging theories of atomism and celestial motion, silenced before their full development, could have hastened a scientific revolution long before. Galileo's telescope pierced the clouds of the Renaissance sky. Medicine may have evolved more rapidly, centuries of trial and error building on preserved empirical observations and critiques. Instead of treading old ground after the loss of accumulated wisdom, navigation could have been transformed to ancient star charts and mathematical projections might have lent seafarers confidence to cross even wider oceans, changing the map of the world well before Europe's age of exploration. And then, consider the subtler effects. Philosophies of tolerance inherited from Alexandria's pluralistic ideals, passed gently across generations, tempering the hardness of later dogmas, nourishing societies more open to debate and difference. Might religious strife have softened if the ongoing dialogues between pagan, Jewish, Christian, and later Islamic thinkers were never violently silenced, but instead nurtured, evolved, and translated into new forms? There is no way to know with certainty. The scrolls that could have answered these questions rest somewhere between myth and ash, but the lost roads linger at the edge of sleep, veins of possibility shimmering in the darkness. Every step that civilization took was guided not only by what was remembered, but by what was forgotten. Not only by discovery, but by the absence of so many insights that might have made the journey gentler or swifter, or altogether different. Let that idea settle softly within you. The ancient world's dreams are never entirely lost, but they beckon still, inviting us to imagine and perhaps to seek out new directions in the shadows of what might have been. And now the mind grows quieter, the sense of Alexandria's grandeur fading gracefully into a landscape of dreams. Amid the unseen shelves and shadowed alcoves, what remains is not a harsh emptiness, but something gentler, more profound, a lullaby, composed of unanswered questions and gentle mysteries. Here, the absence of knowledge is itself a kind of invitation. The vanished texts coax us toward wonder. What secrets still rest in the earth, waiting for a patient hand to uncover a single line, a name, a lost equation? What truths, once inked onto brittle papyrus, still linger beneath the surface of other cultures, translated, adapted, transformed. Even now, discoveries in desert sands and forgotten storerooms yield fragile shards, each a whisper, a tease, the rhythm of hope persevering across centuries. There is solace in this rhythm, a reassurance that the human desire to seek, to question, to dream is never truly lost. That longing is what binds us across eras, what gives the silence of the library its gentle, expectant warmth. The mysteries of Alexandria, mournful though they may seem, gradually become soft and lulling, a balm against an age too crowded with answers, an invitation to drift gracefully into sleep with wonder as faithful company. So let your mind wander through those moonlit ruins, unhurried and at peace. Let the unanswered beckon as a comfort rather than an ache, knowing that the library's most enduring legacy is not only what was taken by flame and time, but the eternal, whispered promise of discovery awaiting every new dawn. Now that we have wandered the ruins and silences of Alexandria, let us gently sift through what can be known with any certainty. When we think of the burning of the library, images leap vividly to mind. Scrolls in flames, scholars scattering, a singular, nightmarish destruction. Yet, as with so much in ancient history, the line between legend and fact is blurred, and the true story is layered with ambiguity. Historians know that there was never just one library, nor necessarily a single cataclysmic fire. The famed Great Library, likely established in the 3rd century BCE beside the Mausian, existed in tandem with a secondary library in the Serapeum Temple. These were institutions, not mere buildings. They waxed and waned, evolving as the city around them did. The notion of a single moment, the Great Fire, comes in part from the Roman historian Plutarch, writing about Caesar's arrival in Alexandria in 48 BCE. During his battle for control, Caesar set fire to ships in the harbor, and the flames appeared to have spread, damaging warehouses and possibly parts of the library. Yet, sources from the time are contradictory. Strabo, who visited Alexandria after Caesar's campaign, still describes the library in the present tense, suggesting at least some of its holdings survived. Other calamities followed, when Christianity became the dominant force in Alexandria. New conflicts arose. In 391 CE, the Serapeum suffered damage during riots and religious strife. Yet accounts differ as to whether the books were still there or already gone. Later, in the 7th century, Arab sources mention the supposed destruction of remaining books by order of Caliph Omar. Yet this story emerges centuries after the fact, not from contemporary witnesses, but as a legend retroactively grafted onto history through careful archaeological study and critical examination of old texts. Historians now see the decline of the library as gradual, a slow erosion through political neglect, shifting priorities, disaster, and ignorance. The myth of a single tragic blaze endures because it is vivid, but the reality is more melancholy. 1,000 small losses, unnoticed, until suddenly wisdom was gone. As you breathe in this gentle truth, know that history often refuses the simplicity of a single answer, preferring instead the rhythm of slow forgetting and, sometimes, quiet rediscovery. Let us now pause and conjure up a vision of the great library itself. Over centuries, artists and writers have imagined Alexandria's library as a vast cathedral of learning. Towering stacks of scrolls, domes flooded with sunlight, rows upon rows of philosophers engaged in eternal dialogue. Yet, what did it actually look like? The evidence, gentle and scattered, invites us to step carefully between dream and reality. No architectural plans survive, nor any conclusive remains unearthed by modern archaeologists. The Mausian, the institution the library was part of, follows the model of Aristotle's Lyceum, a place for both scholarly research and the gathering of learned minds. In Greek tradition, the library was not a single monumental building, but a set of interconnected rooms or wings, part of a larger complex devoted to reflection, experiment, and collective study. Contemporary accounts describe a central repository for scrolls, estimates of which range from 40,000 up to 700,000 over the centuries, though numbers are almost certainly inflated in later retellings. Smaller rooms likely served for group reading, teaching, writing, and copying, with scrolls and codices stored in wooden chests or pigeonholed shelves. Public lecture halls, gardens, courtyards, and even observatories likely dotted the complex, blending intellectual pursuit with calm, meditative spaces. Visitors describe their awe at the gathered knowledge and at the organization of such an immense collection, yet no grand marble facades are mentioned, nor domes rivaling temples. The romantic image is a later blooming. Instead, the library's real genius lay in its intent and activity, the accumulation, preservation, and expansion of human thought, not its ornamentation. Even the staff, the librarians, were extraordinary, philosophers and scientists, renowned in their own right, carefully curating and translating texts from across the world. Archaeological efforts to locate the site have offered only hints. A scattering of halls beneath layers of modern Alexandria, stray inscriptions, and fragments suggesting a broad, evolving institution torn apart and built over again and again. In this way, the physical traces matter less than the shape the library left upon the mind. A structure built as much from intention and hope as from stone and timber. The truth, measured gently against legend, reminds us that the most beautiful spaces are those composed of light, of learning, of the collaborative spirit. And like the vanished library, such spaces linger on, quietly, within us, as we rest among the remnants of legend and scholarly speculation. It is tempting to imagine that the Library of Alexandria housed every secret of the ancient world, its scrolls bursting with revelations lost to time. In reality, the question of what was actually preserved is more nuanced, shaped as much by careful administration as by the ambitions and limitations of the age. The librarians were not mere gatekeepers. They were collectors and curators. Scholars such as Zenodotus, Ptolemaic, and Eratosthenes devoted their lives to organizing, cataloging, and compiling summaries, creating early versions of what we might now call a database. Famed Ptolemaics, or tables, is one such effort, reportedly spanning over 120 volumes, a monumental bibliographic guide to the library's holdings. Yet, the Ptolemaics itself is lost, surviving only in tantalizing references by later scholars. From what later writers record, we can infer the library's collections included a remarkable range of Greek literature, philosophy, and science. Homer, Hesiod, Sappho, and the entire dramatic tradition of Athens. It was also home to translations and commentaries on works from Egypt, Persia, India, Babylon, and even early Rome. Mathematical treatises and astronomical observations gathered. Alongside medical papyri, works on engineering, music, rhetoric, linguistics, geography, and natural history. But there were also gaps and biases. The librarians showed marked preference for high culture and canonical authors, sometimes ignoring or overwriting local Egyptian texts, popular stories, or oral traditions. Furthermore, the act of translation itself, so central to the library's mission, inevitably filtered and recast original materials through Greek assumptions, tastes, and scholarly priorities. Archaeological findings and textual cross-references confirm that certain key works, mathematical treatises, histories, and commentaries, traveled onward, copied and recopied elsewhere. But for countless others, we know them only by their absence. Epic cycles referenced by later poets, scientific treatises cited in passing by Arab mathematicians, catalogues of lost nations rarely seen outside footnotes of medieval chronicles. What remains clear is that the library achieved for a few centuries what no other institution could. It gathered, compared, and challenged the world's ideas, amplifying the rhythm of collective curiosity. What was lost, in the end, was not every secret, but the unmatched momentum of that gathering, and the singular beauty of its diversity. As you inhale the soft dust motes of possibility, let the truth and the legend gently entwine, reminding us that libraries, much like memories, are noble precisely because they cannot be complete. Let us, with patient calm, revisit the many burnings of Alexandria. For generations, histories have pointed to a single world-ending conflagration, yet the truth is more complex. The ending a prolonged dusk, rather than a blinding, thunderous nightfall. The first great fire, often blamed on Julius Caesar, emerges from Roman narratives. According to Plutarch, when Caesar set fire to his fleet to block an Egyptian counterattack, the flames leaped hungrily from port to city, reaching the warehouses said to store scrolls destined for the library. Some accounts claim this destroyed tens of thousands of manuscripts in one night. Others suggest the main collection within the Mausoleum remained untouched, or only partially harmed. The confusion and contradiction testify to the chaos of crisis and the shifting focus of chroniclers. Later, during the struggle between the city's pagan, Christian, and Jewish factions, violence turned inward. In 391 CE, encouraged by Emperor Theodosius I's edicts against pagan temples, Bishop Theophilus led a devastating assault on the Serapeum, the secondary library site and a sanctuary for learning and worship. Ancient sources such as Socrates, Scholasticus, note the temple's destruction, yet the fate of its books remains murky. Some might have been saved, others scattered or lost in unrest. Many, perhaps, had already begun to drift into private hands, or distant libraries, their return unlikely. Finally, the tale of Caliph Omar's order to burn the remaining books after the Arab conquest of 642 CE takes on a distinctly legendary aspect. First narrated in medieval Islamic histories centuries after the event, scholars, including many within the Islamic Golden Age who revered Alexandrian science, regard the story as symbolic, not contemporaneously recorded. Rather than reflecting record-keeping or deliberate policy, it mirrors a broader tendency of cultures to explain a loss so profound that only myth seems equal to it. Modern archaeological evidence points to gradual decay, repurposing of buildings, theft, moisture, insects, and sometimes administrative neglect, forces slower but often more destructive than flames. What the world mourned as an end was, in truth, a lingering process of attrition, silence gathering in layers, the loss nearly invisible until too late. History, in its rhythm, teaches us that catastrophe is seldom simple, and that the greatest Loss may be unnoticed, an idea, a habit, a gentle willingness to listen, carried away, grain by grain, on the wind of time. Allow yourself, now, to drift gently through time, touching the countless retellings of Alexandria's library by poets, scholars, and dreamers of later ages. The story of its fall became almost immediately more than simple history. It became a lens for collective longing, a symbol painted in ever more vivid strokes as centuries slipped quietly by dot in the Roman and medieval imagination. The loss of the library crystallized as the moment civilization itself was set ablaze. Later writers, from the Church Fathers to Renaissance humanists, spoke of it as the darkening of ancient wisdom, a single, tragic event signaling the end of an age of light. Sometimes, when European scholars in the Middle Ages longed for lost classics or struggled to reconcile new discoveries with the wisdom of antiquity, they conjured Alexandria's flames as an explanation for gaps in their knowledge. History's ultimate scapegoat. With the rise of printing, the myth changed and grew bolder. Romantics of the 19th century, imagining the library's grand halls in the vein of their own new book palaces, cast the lost scrolls not just as precious relics, but as blueprints for utopias never reached. Plays, paintings, novels, and poems riffed on the library as the ultimate lost paradise, a place where all questions might have found answers, where the world's every mystery lay, if only for a moment, in human hands. Modern science fiction and fantasy adopted Alexandria too. The library reappears as hidden archives beneath the sands, as alternate timelines where its texts survive, as the emblem of knowledge eternally almost within reach, but not quite graspable. No matter the context, the story of the library became shorthand for the pain and possibility of lost wisdom, a sigh that carries through every generation. Yet, what all these variations reveal is something simple and comforting. It is not the architecture or the tally of scrolls we truly miss, but the spirit of curiosity, openness, and gentle, unending search. Alexandria's myth remains alive, not because we know the whole story, but because the longing for what was lost and the hope of what might still be found is a universal rhythm, coaxing each new age to preserve, to question, and, above all, to dream. In this subtle interplay between fact and lore, stories of Alexandria have gained a patina of the miraculous, part cautionary tale, part invocation of vanished paradise. Over centuries, the library's memory was embroidered with miraculous survivals and devastating losses that can exaggerate both the glories of its heyday and the drama of its decline. Some accounts linger on treasures of unimaginable wisdom within its walls, plans for flying machines, potions for immortality, formulae for turning base metals into gold. Later legends insist that among its vanished scrolls were universal cures, lost plays of Aeschylus and Sophocles, histories of worlds no longer even whispered. Such tales may emerge not just from hope, but from the melancholy knowledge that so much is unknown, and that so many discoveries must inevitably die with their inventors. There are also tales of extraordinary resilience, stories of lost texts, glimpsed later in distant lands, of scrolls smuggled away in the satchels of fleeing scholars, or of secret underground chambers where priceless books waited for better times. In older Jewish, Christian, and Islamic folklore, the library's fate is sometimes tied to legendary figures who protect, hide, or magically reclaim its wisdom, a testament to the yearning for recovery, for the restoration of what was painfully taken. Historians treat these tales tenderly. They recognize the library as much in the dreams and desires of later ages as in the dusty evidence of their research. The miracle, many now believe, is not in a hidden trove waiting to be unearthed, but in the enduring impulse to search, to question, and to recreate what has been lost. Just as the soft light of dusk blends shadow and sun, so does Alexandria's memory balance between miracle and melancholy, comforting us that every library, every collector of dreams, shares in this legacy. And perhaps, most gently of all, these myths teach us to mourn thoughtfully and to love fiercely the fragile, beautiful, and fleeting wisdom we still possess. As the centuries pass, Alexandria's physical remnants fade, yet its true bequest to the world persists in less tangible but far more resilient forms. The values that the library championed, a reverence for inquiry, for openness to foreign voices, for gathering and sharing knowledge, survived the melting away of its walls and the scattering of its scrolls. The practices honed in Alexandria, systematic cataloging, critical editing, and collaboration across cultures, reverberate in every great center of learning that came after. The scholarship of Baghdad's House of Wisdom, the monastic scriptoria of medieval Europe, even the later libraries of Florence, Istanbul, and Timbuktu, all owe subtle debts to Alexandria's cosmopolitan, boundary-crossing spirit. No less important is the legacy of translation. The library cherished and fostered the rendering of ideas into new languages and traditions. Through the hands of Ptolemaic administrators to Arabic, Syriac, and Hebrew scholars, this spirit of adaptation ensured that knowledge would not only survive but transform, suited to each new civilization's own context and questions. Even the legends themselves have had utility. To every age anxiously facing the loss of its own treasures, through fire, war, or neglect, the story of Alexandria's fall offers both a warning and a cherished goal to safeguard what is fragile and to make room for the unknown. Each new academy, archive, digital library, and humble personal bookshelf is built, in part, with Alexandria's hope and caution inscribed within it, urging us to preserve, question, and cherish our own inheritance. And so, as you let your mind drift in the quiet glow of modern comfort, remember that Alexandria's legacy is not one of ashes, but of seeds, carried by winds of memory to far-off soils, germinating anew wherever minds gather and learn, quietly making the world a little fuller, a little wiser. Now, gently return your attention to the present, feeling how Alexandria's spirit quietly resonates through the world we know. The library's story is not simply an elegy for what is lost, but a guide, softly urgent, persistently relevant, for how we might nurture wisdom and understanding amid our own uncertainties, in an age of digital archives and fragile data, of vast interconnected flows of information, and the ever-present risk of sudden sweeping loss. Alexandria's rhythms are more familiar than ever. We see ourselves echoed in the anxiety of preservation, the hope that backup copies and distributed servers may spare our era the trauma of irreplaceable erasure. And too, we sense the risks of dogma, intolerance, or simple neglect which, amplified, could reduce the treasures of our time to unseen silence. But the story is also one of resilience. Today's libraries, physical, digital, or deeply personal, still pursue the Alexandrian ideal, to collect, organize, and share, regardless of boundary or origin. Universities welcome scholars from every land, translation flourishes on screens, and in classrooms, and networks of learning stretch wider than their founders dreamed. just as the Mausian once drew minds from Athens, Babylon, and India. There is a lesson, too, in humility. The best of what Alexandria cultivated was not a sense of completion, but a habit of gentle, lifelong curiosity, the willingness to question what is known, to welcome dissent and uncertainty, and to cherish the slow, sometimes untidy accretion of insight. These are gifts as vital now as they were by the Mediterranean long ago, as you tuck yourself deeper into warmth and shadow. Let the story of Alexandria reassure you, the rhythm of seeking and safeguarding knowledge, of listening to diverse voices, never truly ends. The past softly entwines with the present, coaxing us, no matter how much we lose or forget, to build anew, to wonder kindly, and to leave a legacy of learning for those who will follow after our own dreams have faded. Wander now, with a gentle mind, through the enduring uncertainty that surrounds Alexandria's fate, an uncertainty that, far from agitating the spirit, can be a surprising source of comfort. Recognizing that history is rarely absolute, that even the brightest torches leave gaps and shadows, allows us to relax into the embrace of the unknown, to accept that some answers remain forever beyond our reach. This uncertainty is not failure, but invitation. It is the soft, persistent beckoning of curiosity, reminding us that mystery has its own value. The gaps in our story encourage each generation to look closer, to seek nuance where others saw only dramatic loss, to listen to overlooked voices and question accepted truths. In this, Alexandria's story gently shapes the rhythm of our own, learning, reminding us that no era truly possesses perfect knowledge, but that each has a role in reframing, rediscovering, and safeguarding what can be found. There is comfort, too, in recognizing the cycles of loss and renewal. Alexandria's wisdom was not destroyed so much as it was transformed, scattered like seeds to distant lands and later ages. If some truths were swept away, others returned by unexpected routes, through translation, adaptation, or simple human perseverance. The gaps in our record are spaces for imagination, for hope, for new stories yet unwritten. And so, as you rest in this gentle twilight of understanding, let the uncertainty itself become a balm. Let it free you from the burden of certainty, urging instead toward peaceful curiosity and the patient savoring of small discoveries, the kind that emerge only in quiet, in time, and in trust. Within the hush of lingering questions, Alexandria's spirit persists, offering not a lesson of despair, but of possibility, that even what is lost continues, in some way, to shape the world we know. Now, as our journey winds to a peaceful close, curl up in the quiet company of all that Alexandria has left behind, not merely a tale of vanished scrolls, but a gentle reminder that to be human is to live with both memory and forgetting. The library's legacy rests less in vaults of marble or lost catalogues than in the steady, hopeful rhythm of minds seeking, dreaming, and daring to preserve the wisdom entrusted to them. In truth, every age must face its own Alexandrias, moments when knowledge teeters between survival and silence, when a single act of care or neglect sends ripples across centuries. Alexandria's story, stripped of myth but clothed in the warmth of our longing, gently urges us onward to value what we have, to gather what we can, and to share it freely, knowing that no collection is ever perfect or forever. The line dividing legend from history blurs, as all great stories do when retold by night's hush. What matters is not the tally of loss, but the quiet resolve it leaves to question, to listen, to remember and imagine, and above all, to kindle a small, steady beacon for those who will seek after us. So, as you drift into sleep, let this rhythm of history, part fact, part dream, all comfort, settle over you. The Library of Alexandria, real and imagined, remains with us always, in questions we still ask, in tales we gently guard, and in the ever-renewing trust that sparks of wisdom, no matter how dimmed, may yet light the world again. And now, as the candlelight of memory flickers low, let your spirit settle into the comfort of the present, wrapped gently in the echoes of Alexandria's distant halls and the slow, steady rhythm of discovery and forgetting. The library that once tried to gather all the world's wonders may be gone, but its true legacy lingers tenderly, woven into every quiet act of curiosity, every library or gathering of minds, every story carefully preserved or simply retold across generations. In your own life, with every moment of wandering, reading, sharing, teaching, you are a faint but unbroken link in Alexandria's chain, a continuation of hope, resilience, and care for wisdom. The embers of lost scrolls have not left us cold. If anything, they have stirred a longing that makes us cherish what we know, inspires us to seek what we do not, and teaches us, gently, to accept the spaces where mystery patiently waits. The greatest comfort is not in the certainty of having preserved everything, but in the promise that every attempt, however humble, to safeguard truth or beauty is part of an eternal human lullaby. If you are still awake, feel the hush of gratitude for the world's collected knowledge around you, knowing it is ever incomplete but ever growing. And if, by now, you've slipped quietly into sleep, then may your dreams be full of marble corridors, gentle voices debating in the dusk, and the persistent warmth of questions softly asked and never quite answered. Good night, gentle seeker. The library's light burns quietly on, in you, in us, and in every soul that rests in the comfort of wonder.